For generations, it represented love, tradition, and togetherness. Long before modern shortcuts and packaged mixes, grandmothers relied on recipes they trusted with their whole hearts. These were not flashy dishes. They were recipes tested year after year, passed down through memory and repetition rather than written instructions. When Grandma swore by a recipe, it meant it never failed. Holiday meals often began days in advance. Dough was prepared early, meats were seasoned carefully, and desserts were planned with patience. Nothing was rushed. Roast chicken or turkey was at the center of many holiday tables. Grandma knew how to make it tender, flavorful, and comforting without complicated techniques. Mashed potatoes were whipped by hand, seasoned slowly, and served generously. They were never just a side dish, they were comfort on a plate. Stuffing was made from day-old bread, onions, herbs, and memories. Every family had its own version, and Grandma defended hers proudly. Gravy was never poured from a packet. It was made from pan drippings, flour, and careful stirring until it reached the perfect consistency. Green bean casseroles appeared on many tables, not because they were trendy, but because they brought everyone together. Sweet potato dishes were often baked, mashed, or lightly sweetened. Grandma understood balance, not too sweet, not too heavy. Cranberry sauces were cooked slowly on the stove, filling kitchens with holiday scents. Dinner rolls were often homemade. Even when simple, they were warm, soft, and comforting. Holiday soups were sometimes served before the main meal. Broths were simmered slowly, building flavor over hours. Pies were a point of pride. Apple pie, pumpkin pie, and pecan pie were made with care, never rushed. Pie crusts were mixed by feel, not measurement. Grandma trusted her hands more than recipes. Cookies were baked in large batches, meant to be shared, gifted, and enjoyed for days. Fruitcakes, though controversial, held a special place in holiday traditions. Rice puddings and bread puddings were common desserts, making use of leftovers without waste. Holiday breakfasts were just as important. Pancakes, eggs, and biscuits started the day gently. Coffee and tea were always ready, welcoming guests into warm kitchens. Holiday meals stretched across hours, not minutes. Eating was slow and meaningful. Children learned patience by watching Grandma cook. Nothing was wasted. Leftovers were saved, reused, and appreciated. Holiday recipes were reliable because they were simple. They focused on flavor, warmth, and familiarity. Grandma cooked for people, not presentation. Her recipes carried stories, not measurements. Every dish had a memory attached to it. These holiday recipes were not just food, they were traditions. And that is why Grandma swore by them. Holiday recipes our grandmas swore by were shaped by experience, not trends. These meals were perfected over decades, adjusted slightly each year, and trusted completely when it mattered most. One of the most dependable holiday dishes was baked ham. Slow roasted and glazed carefully, it fed large families and provided leftovers for days. Grandma valued meals that kept giving. Scalloped potatoes were another holiday essential. Thinly sliced potatoes, layered with cream and seasoning, created a rich dish that felt special without being complicated. Homemade stuffing often varied from year to year, depending on what was available. Sometimes it included sausage, sometimes just herbs and onions. Either way, it was always comforting. Corn casseroles and spoon bread appeared frequently, especially in families where corn was a staple ingredient. These dishes were filling and familiar. Gravy was treated with great respect. Grandma knew that good gravy could bring an entire meal together. It was stirred patiently and seasoned carefully. Green vegetables were often prepared simply. Butter, salt, and slow cooking allowed natural flavors to shine. Sweet potato casseroles were balanced carefully. Grandma avoided overpowering sweetness, preferring a subtle, comforting flavor. Dinner rolls were often baked fresh on the day of the holiday. Even imperfect rolls were cherished because they were homemade. Holiday salads were simpler than modern versions. Potato salad, coleslaw, or gelatin salads were prepared ahead of time to save effort on the main day. Soup or stew was sometimes served as a starter, especially in colder climates. These warm beginnings set the tone for the meal. Desserts held special importance. Pies were baked early, cooled patiently, and served proudly. Pumpkin pie was spiced gently, never overpowering. Apple pies balanced sweetness and tartness perfectly. Cakes were often simple pound cakes or spice cakes, dusted lightly rather than heavily frosted. Cookies were made in large batches, filling tins and plates for guests to enjoy throughout the season. Holiday breakfasts were calm and familiar. Biscuits, eggs, and coffee started the day quietly before the larger meal. Grandma believed in feeding people well, not impressing them. Holiday meals were about consistency and comfort. Guests expected certain dishes every year, and Grandma delivered without fail. Leftovers were planned intentionally. Nothing was wasted. Turkey sandwiches, soups, and casseroles followed holiday feasts. Holiday cooking required organization and patience. Grandma prepared what she knew would work. She trusted her instincts. Her recipes were built on memory, repetition, and love. There was no rush in her kitchen. Cooking was a way of showing care. These recipes lasted because they were dependable. They were familiar, comforting, and deeply personal. They carried the weight of tradition. They brought families together year after year. And that is why these holiday recipes were sworn by and never replaced. Holiday recipes our grandmas swore by were built around rhythm and routine. Each dish had its place, and every step was done with intention. There was comfort in knowing exactly how the meal would come together. One trusted holiday favorite was slow-roasted turkey or chicken, prepared simply with salt, herbs, and patience. Grandma understood that time was the most important ingredient. Pan drippings were never wasted. They became the base for rich gravies or were saved to flavor other dishes. Nothing from the roasting pan went unused. Mashed potatoes were prepared early and kept warm. Grandma knew they would disappear quickly once served. Stuffing was often baked separately to ensure the perfect texture. Crispy edges and soft centers were carefully balanced. Green vegetables like carrots, peas, or green beans were cooked gently. Overcooking was avoided to preserve both flavor and color. Holiday casseroles were reliable side dishes. They could be prepared ahead of time and baked when needed, reducing stress. Sweet dishes were handled with restraint. Grandma believed desserts should complement the meal, not overpower it. Fruit-based desserts like apple crisp or baked pears were common. They used seasonal ingredients and were easy to prepare. Pie crusts were rolled out carefully. Often reused scraps turned into small treats for children. Cookies were baked gradually throughout the season. Some were meant to soften over time, others to stay crisp. Holiday breads, such as nut loaves or sweet rolls, were baked to be shared and gifted. Breakfasts during holidays were lighter. Toast, eggs, and coffee allowed room for the main meal later. Grandma's kitchen ran on quiet confidence. There were no written schedules, just memory and experience. Cooking was done early to allow time for rest and conversation. Holiday meals were served without rush. People lingered at the table. Children learned family history through food stories. Recipes were rarely written down. They were taught by watching and helping. Measurements were estimated. Taste guided every decision. Grandma adjusted dishes instinctively based on the people she was feeding. Some dishes appeared every year, unchanged. Others evolved slightly, but never lost their essence. Holiday leftovers were cherished. They meant the celebration continued. Soups, sandwiches, and casseroles followed big meals. Cooking during holidays was about care, not perfection. Grandma believed that familiar food made people feel welcome. Her recipes worked because they were tested through time. They were forgiving, flexible, and dependable. They survived decades because they fit real life. These holiday recipes were not trends. They were traditions. They represented stability, comfort, and love. And that is why Grandma trusted them completely. Holiday recipes our grandmas swore by were deeply connected to preparation and planning. Long before the holiday arrived, ingredients were gathered, menus were decided, and mental notes were made. Grandma believed good food began with readiness. One dependable dish was the classic roast beef or pot roast. Slowly cooked and well seasoned, it provided a rich centerpiece and plenty of leftovers. This reliability made it a holiday favorite. Baked casseroles were trusted because they could be assembled early and baked later. This reduced pressure on the holiday itself and allowed more time with family. Stuffed vegetables, such as peppers or squash, were sometimes served when feeding large groups. They were economical, filling, and flavorful. Gravy was always made fresh. Grandma understood that even the simplest meal felt special when topped with good gravy. Potato dishes appeared in many forms. Mashed, baked, or scalloped, potatoes were filling and familiar, making them a guaranteed success. Vegetable sides were prepared with restraint. Grandma preferred natural flavors enhanced with butter or seasoning rather than heavy sauces. Sweet potato dishes varied by family, but balance was key. Too much sweetness was avoided to keep the meal grounded. Holiday breads were baked with care. Yeast breads, rolls, and loaves were proofed patiently, allowing time to do the work. Desserts were never rushed. Pies cooled completely before slicing, and cakes were given time to settle. Fruit-based desserts were common, especially during colder months. Apples, pears, and dried fruits were used thoughtfully. Cookies were baked in batches over several days. This allowed flavors to develop and reduced last-minute stress. Holiday drinks were simple. Coffee, tea, and occasionally homemade punch welcomed guests warmly. Grandma believed a calm kitchen produced better food. There was no shouting or panic, only steady movement. Holiday meals were built around familiarity. Guests knew what to expect and looked forward to it. Children helped with simple tasks, learning responsibility and tradition. Nothing was thrown away. Leftover vegetables became soups. Meats became sandwiches or casseroles. The kitchen stayed busy even after the holiday meal. Grandma planned meals for days afterward. These recipes were forgiving. They did not require precision, only care. Mistakes were rare because Grandma trusted what she knew. She cooked by feel, smell, and taste. Holiday meals were not about impressing others. They were about making people feel at home. Grandma measured success by full plates and quiet smiles. Her recipes carried confidence and calm. They had survived decades of holidays. They were shared with pride, not written instructions. Each holiday meal reinforced tradition. These recipes connected generations. They reminded families of who they were. And that is why Grandma never changed them. Holiday recipes our grandmas swore by endured because they were dependable in every sense. They worked no matter how many people showed up, how busy the kitchen became, or how little time was left. These recipes were built for real life. One final truth about Grandma's holiday cooking was consistency. The same dishes appeared year after year, creating comfort through familiarity. Guests did not ask what would be served, they already knew. Simple roasted meats remained central. Whether turkey, chicken, or beef, these dishes required patience more than complexity. Grandma trusted slow cooking and seasoning over shortcuts. Side dishes were chosen carefully. Each one served a purpose, balancing the meal rather than competing with it. Potatoes added comfort, vegetables added freshness, and breads added warmth. Stuffing was never experimental. Grandma believed holidays were not the time to try something new. Reliability mattered most. Gravy was always made in enough quantity. She knew it would be poured generously over everything. Vegetables were served plainly, allowing flavors to speak for themselves. Overcomplication was avoided. Desserts were familiar and comforting. Pies, cakes, and puddings reminded everyone of past holidays. Holiday baking was spread over time. Nothing was rushed. On the final day, Grandma believed stress showed up in food. Leftovers were celebrated, not ignored. The days after the holiday were just as important as the meal itself. Soups, sandwiches, and casseroles followed, extending the joy of the holiday. The kitchen stayed active, but never chaotic. Everything had its rhythm. Holiday meals were never rushed. Conversation mattered as much as eating. Grandma cooked with confidence earned through repetition. She adjusted dishes instinctively based on the crowd. No two holidays were exactly the same, yet the food always felt familiar. These recipes were forgiving. They allowed room for error. They did not demand perfection. They demanded care. Grandma understood that food was memory. Each dish carried stories of past holidays, of people who came before, of traditions that survived time. These recipes were rarely written down. They were passed through watching, helping, and remembering. They were taught by standing beside Grandma in the kitchen. Holiday cooking was her language of love. The food brought people together. It created moments that lasted longer than the meal. Even when tastes changed, these recipes remain. They were not replaced by trends. They did not need improvement. They had already proven themselves. These holiday recipes were trusted because they worked. They brought warmth to cold days. They filled homes with familiar smells. They reminded families who they were. And that is why Grandma swore by them. Not because they were perfect, but because they never failed.